introducing anyone because all your bios have been online for some time, so we don't want to take up your time. Already, Thompson and Venice have taken up 4 minutes of Subbalakshmi's time. So, Professor Subbalakshmi Mahapatra, over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Galla. Thank you so much, Dr. Gilbert, for giving me this opportunity to speak about my research. I would allow me to present my screen. Hope my screen is visible.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So today for today's presentation, I'm going to talk about an interesting area of research, which I have been researching for quite some time. So the topic of my research is to grow or not to grow, understanding the artisanal dilemma through case study based research in India. Now, before I go into the presentation, I would like to take this opportunity to discuss that this research, there are multiple case studies that we have taken as a part of Anand Fellowship course, which I teach as Cultural Economics and Entrepreneurship. And therein, we try to understand what are the major dilemmas that the artisans are facing in the current context. Now, the major context on which I want to discuss it here is whether to grow or not. And that has been a major discussion, major debate for most of the artisans, at least in Indian context. And I'm sure there are quite a few researchers which have focused in developed countries context as well. Now, with this in background, let me speak a little bit on the introduction. Now, one of the most prominent areas of research in the field of entrepreneurship has been towards growth. And even though growth has been one of the most important organizational outcomes, most of the times entrepreneurs may differ in their motivations towards growth of their firms. Now, at this context, I would like to also mention that there is a little bit of difference between what entrepreneurship is all about and what artisanal entrepreneurs are all. Now, artisanal entrepreneurs can be defined as individuals who put emphasis on manual production over mass production. And it's very important to understand the definition of artisanal entrepreneurs, because that is actually that actually defines the nature or the characteristics of the artisanal entrepreneurs. So artisanal entrepreneurs are any individuals who put emphasis on manual production over mass production, autonomy and independence over conglomeration, local community over attaining scale, and increased value creation over profit maximization. So if you look closely, artisanal entrepreneurs, generally, the characteristics of those artisanal entrepreneurs are more not oriented towards growth. Now, there had been quite a lot of researchers which have shown that in developed nations, the artisan categories are rapidly growing, and also the artisan firms are also rising. Now, at the same time, it is also important to understand that artisans face dilemma in taking business-related decisions. It is mainly because of choosing between contrasting values, the values we are going to discuss later, and deciding which values to hold on to and which ones to modify. Research also has shown that there has been a massive growth of handicraft industries and firms all over the world. And at the same time, research has also shown that handicraft industry, even though has a rich history in terms of building up the art and heritage of a particular place, it most of the times has been heavily neglected. Now, with this in mindset, the current research objectives is to identify whether the artisanal entrepreneurs, where I define it as AE, conform to the artisanal entrepreneurs' characteristics and value, or whether they pursue growth as a contrast. And at the same time, the second research objective is to identify the reasons of why or why not the artisans embrace growth in a developing nation context, such as India. Now, let me just let you go to a little bit on the background of this research, and I would just like to pinpoint some of the important literature that I have focused in the current context. I have divided the literature review into two important parts. In the first part, I define in terms of who the artisanal entrepreneurs are all about. But before I define the artisanal entrepreneur, I wanted to have a brief definition of what entrepreneurship is all about, or entrepreneurs are all about. Now, entrepreneurs are defined as individuals who take calculated risk, recognize market imperfections, and are aimed towards growth and efficiency. This has been a very prominent definition that has been given by Baumel in 1993. As contrast to this, Smith, much earlier, has referred to entrepreneurs who are non-growth oriented as artisans or craftsmen, in contrast to the growth-oriented and dynamic opportunity entrepreneurs. And therefore, he has also defined, subsequently, it has been also defined that most of the non-growth orientation is because either of ignorance or because they are unable to innovate in their respective areas. Now, traditionally, artisan entrepreneurs have limited customer reach, and as the revenue from the sales are majorly derived during artisans' fairs or from small local shops. Therefore, if you look essentially about growth for artisanal entrepreneurs generally implies either building up more stores or attending more artisan fairs. However, on the contrast, researchers have suggested that artisans as a group possess a counter-institutional identity. And this is very important because that actually defines the characteristics of the artisanal entrepreneurship, which actually adheres to the quality of whether to grow or not. Now, this counter-institutional identity can be defined as a set of values and beliefs that run counter to mainstream businesses, where growth is the valued outcome. Now, while we are talking about this counter-institutional identity, it is very important to also define what these counter-institutional identities are all about. And the researchers have suggested that there may be two major types of counter-institutional identities, wherein one can be defined as the oppositional identity, that is who we are not or who they are not. And this generally defines as an entity. This defines when an entity defines itself at least partly in opposition to or as the antithesis of another entity. On the contrary, when we are talking about relational identity, which is again one part of the counter-institutional identities, it suggests that who they are and who they want to support. And these identities actually create boundaries between values which are indicative within the group that is us and those outside the group that is them. Now, these counter-institutional identities are most of the times associated with adhering to traditional production techniques or craft authenticity, which is in harmony with the values and principles of artisan entrepreneurs. And thus, the artisan's commitment to authenticity and small-scale production and the process involved are very closely associated with this counter-institutional identity. And therefore, artisans might not therefore prioritize growth. However, with the advancement of the online medium and the social movement towards artisans, there might be growth advancements of their firms. In this context, therefore, my current study tries to focus on whether in Indian context, the artisanal entrepreneurs adhere to their basic characteristics or whether they look into growth as an alternative towards their development. Coming to the methodology, while as I mentioned, this was part of a course that I have taught in the Anand Fellowship, which is called as Cultural Economics and Entrepreneurship, and there were multiple case studies that students had taken in order to analyze this artisanal dilemma. However, for our understanding and not to complicate the situation, I have taken only one case study, and the same case study I'm going to discuss it here. So for the methodology, the case study methodology was adopted. And here in this case, I'm only talking about a single case study, even though actually for the course, there were multiple case studies that were being adopted. The context in which the methodology is being taken into account is that the bamboo artisans from Pune, Maharashtra, India were being selected. Now, the reason why the bamboo artisans from Pune, Maharashtra were selected is because bamboo handcrafting in Pune is a family business which has been passed down to almost since 150 years in a community of artisans called as the Burud community. And they are actually settled in an area called as the Burud Ali in Mandai, old city of Pune. While this handicraft business is quite a old business that family business that has been initiated, but at the same time, Pune as such shows the characteristics of a metropolitan city, and therefore there can be the orientation towards growth for this bamboo artisans in this category, and that was the reason why the bamboo artisans from Pune, Maharashtra were being selected. Now, the data collection was adopted through multiple methods. First, the focus group discussions were conducted, and for this particular case study, 4 FGDs was conducted with a total of 32 artisans that were being taken into account. Followed by observations, which included photography, videography, and the related documents. The data analysis was conducted in majorly 2 phases. Initially, the codes were being generated from the interview transcripts, which were subsequently merged to identify the key themes while using the method of constant comparison. Now, the coding was done by both the researchers independently, and the intercoder reliability in this case was almost around 92%. The second phase was unfolding of the findings into insights from the existing literature of the current topic. And this enabled us to contextualize and develop our findings from a theoretical grounding. And finally, reliability and validity of the data was ensured through checks for credibility, transferability, conformability, integrity, and dependability based on the guidelines of earlier researchers, as has been cited here. Some of the important findings, I'm just noting it down here, that the codes that, as I discussed earlier, from the transcript, certain codes were being generated, and from those codes, the categories were being developed. From those categories, then subsequently the themes were being generated, which came out as the antecedents, oppositional identity, relational identity as a theme, moderator as another theme, and growth opportunity as another theme. So there were 5 major themes that were being generated from the categories and from the codes that were being derived from the transcripts of the interviews that were being conducted. I'm not getting into the details of it because of the time constraint, but the codes majorly talked about in terms of the categories of supply, demand, the authenticity, the historic value, the production process, the profit, and so on and so forth. While it is important, I'm not giving much of a detail on the findings, I was very curious to give you an insight about the conceptual model that was developed from the insights that were derived from the findings. Now, in the conceptual model that was developed, we found out that there were certain antecedents for the artisanal identity, and those antecedents are in terms of the demand and supply of the factors, demand and supply of the handicraft industry. This all led to the artisanal identity, which could be in terms of either the oppositional identity or the relational identity. And many a times we found out that the oppositional identity and the relational identity resembled a close significance to each other, thereby indicating that the artisanal identity is majorly associated with this counter-institutional identities of either to oppose of what they are not or to relate with what they are. Subsequent to that, we found out that there is a close relationship between the artisanal identity and the growth opportunities. And these growth opportunities were moderated majorly with the market or the institutional factors, moderators. And these growth opportunities were identified in in terms of understanding whether the youth, the current generation, is interested to get into this business more and more or not, or whether they have a relative proximity to the market or the cost and price management techniques and so on. And all this subsequently led to the growth value. Now, some of the implications for theory and practice from this research is that the first contribution lies in identifying the nature of artisanal dilemma. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that even though a lot has been discussed in developed countries context, little has been known in terms of a developing nation context. And while it is very important to understand the developed nations context, because therein the artisanal entrepreneurs are increasing as well as their growth motivation is increasing, it is also equally important to identify the same thing in a developing nation context as well. Earlier research in this field had defined artisan entrepreneurs as entrepreneurs with the basic traits of being non-innovative, non-growth oriented, narrowly educated, and non-opportunistic individuals who are socially unaware individuals. However, when we did the focus group discussions, we found out that technological advances, along with many of the social factors, have actually empowered artisans, and thereby they have turned out to be more and more entrepreneurs. It also has been found out from this research that antecedents such as demand and supply led to the advancement of the decision making among the entrepreneurs to support the counter-institutional identities, and which was primarily not the case in previous researches. The previous researchers suggested that artisans should curtail growth as that goes against their identity, whereas our results suggest that counter-institutional identity may in fact help identify and explain why and how artisanal entrepreneurs might also promote growth. We also identify factors affecting oppositional identity and relational identity towards creation of the artisanal identity and towards subsequently leading to the advancement of the growth process. At the same time, we also identified the effect of major moderators such as the marketing facilities available, the government support that was available, and so on and so forth, which was very much instrumental towards the artisanal, towards developing and influencing the artisanal identity through the growth process. And last but not the least, this particular research leaves with a question on the growth trajectory of the entrepreneur that would be taking shape based on the various constructs mentioned in the present study. Now, with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Hope I'm very much in time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Subbalakshmi. My God, your time management is perfect. I'm really impressed. I wish you're a conference organizer's dream, the way you presented. All right, we will take questions after all. Other two presenters have also shared with us. Next is Professor Vanessa Gorishankar. Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Gala. Thank you, everybody, for being present. I can see that the audience is growing. It's very encouraging. So today, I will talk about something quite, not unusual, but quite different related to tourism research. Because most of the time when we talk about tourism research, we have the tendency to talk about the impacts, about what has happened after the pandemic, or we are going to talk about the cultural resources, we are going to talk about the economy, the society, and the environment. But after I joined the Anand National University, I realized that there is a link between the built environment and tourism. And from my point of view, I had the tendency to be into tourism management, tourism marketing. So this part was a bit not too explored from my side. So I would like to start by sharing my screen. I hope, yeah. I would like to start by sharing my screen. And I would also like to inform the audience that this is a small scale study that was conducted by my colleague, Patida Pavan Mohanty. He's from Odisha. I'm not from Orissa, so the data collection took place in Orissa, and he was the principal investigator. I am just the second person. And then we have also another contributor, Jasmine Golil, but she has not been able to really contribute this time, probably next time. But for today, I think Patida Pavan Mohanty also will present the part where we will talk about the data collection and the methodology, because I might not be in the best position to do that. So moving further, well, I wanted to show you these two pictures. Kerala, God's own country. So this is the place where we're supposed to be. Unfortunately, God said that we should not come. So we are still in Ahmedabad, and people are in other places of the world. So you can see that this is a Matride Cathedral. This is a chapel. And I think Professor Benny also highlighted a lot on chapel in Kerala. And then here on the left, we are going to see that it's a Science City museum, and I visited it with the students recently. So when we see these things, these are not things that were already existing. Just like we can see the mountains, we can see the waterfalls, we can see rivers. So these were built. So this leads us to realize a bit, to dive a bit deeper into that link between built environment and tourism. And I think that this conference has got this, how do you call that, responsible post-pandemic tourism, built environment and design excellence. And this is the reason why I am taking some time to show the importance of the built environment. Again, here we can see the Bara, Imam Bara. It's an Indo-Islamic piece. It's an architectural monument, and it's found in Lucknow. And then on the right, we can see the Hathi Cave in Odisha. I'm sure that Subhalakshmi must have visited that because it's her place also. So when we look at all these architectural monuments, we see all those buildings. They are very old, but then they have got a tourism value. We have also Barros Island in Maldives. We have got the Palm Islands around Dubai. So all those things constitute the built environment. They were not naturally there. Of course, there's a combination of nature and then some kind of architecture which came into that, and it became something. And then that something is something that is being marketed heavily in tourism. We also have some other important architecture that I would like to share. The Disneyland. Disneyland receives around 12 million visitors yearly, around 40,000 visitors per day. This is, I can remember that. And then we have got the Great Wall of China. So these are some of the examples showing to us that built environment is an integral part of any tourism experience. And I think this morning I was talking to some people, I was explaining how sometimes without saying that we are a cultural tourist, we are a cultural tourist. A tourist is absolutely a cultural tourist. The moment that we enter a plane, for example, if you're traveling from Mauritius, you're going to take Air India. The moment that you see the air hostess coming in front of you with a sari, with a traditional cloak, it's already, the cultural tourism experience has already started. We are not going to say that it's a cultural tourism experience. We're going to say that we are traveling to India for tourism. But then this is the cultural tourism experience, because when we talk about cultural tourism experience, it's about sharing, experiencing, and witnessing something which is different as compared to our culture. So let me go further. Architecture and tourism. This is the gist of the topic for this presentation. Architecture plays a critical role in almost every area of tourism. And I think that this is absolutely very true, because wherever I go, I should see some elements of architecture around. So it provides infrastructure to enable tourists to reach the desired destination. Also accommodation, for example, in India, we have got palaces that have been converted into hotels, and tourists, they travel, they want to stay in hotels because they want to have that experience of a palace, you know. And then also there is something called iconic building. So iconic building, as we can see here on the right, I think it's the Konark Temple, if I'm not mistaken. I hope that my Professor Mohanty is around so that he can correct me. So iconic buildings make cities easily recognizable. People recognize a city by its iconic building. For example, we know Paris by La Tour Eiffel. We know India by Taj Mahal. Ahmedabad is known by the Science City also. So there are so many iconic buildings that help in tourism, and it also it is a very strong pull factor in tourism. Moving further, some more information about architecture. We say that architecture is the face of a destination, which means that when we see a building, for example, on the right, we can see the gate of India. I think it's in Bombay, and we have one in Delhi as well, if I'm not mistaken. So it reminds us of India. When we see the Taj Mahal, it reminds us of India. If we see some other things like, for example, the London Eye reminds us of the UK, of the United Kingdom of London. So it offers a cultural experience. Architecture is offering now a cultural experience, because when we try to explore it from a tourism lens, we realize that all the buildings that we have, it has got some tourism connotation. People, when they are traveling, they open their eyes wide. They want to see the building. They want to see the people. They want to take pictures. They want to tell the driver, please stop a bit. This building looks very interesting. I want to take a picture because it's different. So which means that architecture has the potential to offer a cultural experience. Architecture is an objectified cultural capital. And we say that it is the diversity of styles and functions that make exceptional building unique, symbolic, and visually appealing to the tourists, because most of the tourists, when they travel, they are not, we say that, I was also saying something the other day, that I don't travel because I want to see your hotel. I don't travel because I want to sit in the plane. I travel because I want to see the people. I want to experience their culture. I want to take a picture of people wearing some different type of clothes. I want to experience their food. I want to see their performance. I want to be involved in their dances. So these are the things that we want to experience as a cultural tourist. So that is why I keep on saying that all tourists are cultural tourists. They might be saying, no, I'm not a cultural tourist, I'm a nature tourist, I'm an eco-tourist, I'm this and that. No, you are a cultural tourist the moment you leave your place where you're living and you travel to another place. Why you're traveling to another place? Because you want to see something else. So that is the reason I say that all tourists are cultural tourists. Now we have got a definition of cultural tourism. We have got so many, but this one is coming from the United Nations World Tourism Organization General Assembly in Chengdu, which took place in September 2017. They say that cultural tourism is a type of tourism activity in which the visitors' essential motivation is to learn, discover, experience, and consume the tangible and intangible cultural attractions, products in a tourism destination. And I think that this summarizes a bit about what I was saying since the very beginning. And when we talk about cultural tourism, I'm sure that Prof. Sagala is a good icon about this. But whenever I talk about cultural tourism, I have the tendency to think about Prof. Sagala, because he has been organizing so many webinars on heritage matters. And all those webinars covers so many interesting things about culture and heritage. And when we talk about cultural tourism, it intersects with heritage, religious sites, crafts, performing arts, gastronomy. It's a long list. And most of the countries now, they include tangible and intangible heritage in the definition of cultural tourism. And over 80% include contemporary culture, film, performing arts, design, fashion, and new media. So there are new elements that are getting into that cultural tourism thing. Why they are doing that? Because they know that cultural tourism has got a potential. Let me move further. Yes. So as you can see here, we have got another report on cultural heritage and tourism development. And in this report, they are talking about culture and tourism. They have a symbiotic relationship. Absolutely very true. Because so far we can see that how tourists, when they travel, they are interested in immersing in others' culture. Arts, crafts, dances, rituals. Even when I'm traveling, I'm interested to see some shows, some local shows. I'm interested to take picture with people. I'm interested to eat their food and try to see how it is. But there is something, arts, crafts, dances, and rituals, according to this report, is at risk. They are at risk of being forgotten by younger generation. But this can be revitalized when tourists show a keen interest in them. But of course, then we have the issue of we have a stage authenticity, we have commercialization, we have got commodification issues. So this gets into play whenever we are talking about trying to revitalize tourism, the cultural tourism performance with the new generation. And this is an interesting article to show how prevalent is the discussion on cultural and heritage tourism. I saw that yesterday because I'm on so many international platforms. So there was someone talking about, and these are Nigerian people. They are saying something very interesting. If you want to talk about people that value and respect culture, customs and traditions in Nigeria, it goes to the northern people. The respect, commitment, and passion they have for their culture, tradition is amazing. So it's just like a statement. And they say that through tourism, you will get to meet new people, get to know more about languages, lifestyle, cultures, customs, and traditions. Tourism is life. And I completely believe into this statement that tourism is life. People, all the people are traveling now. People are traveling because there is that urge. They want to see what's happening in the other world. And then, as I was saying earlier, people do not travel to stay in hotel. They travel to experience new culture. And then we have got a statement from Maitland and Newman, 2008. They state that visitors are not drawn by tourist attraction, but by qualities of place and culture. And when we are talking about quality of places and culture, we are referring to architecture, people, food, culture, diversity, performance, and the list is ongoing. And probably whatever I have said is summarized in this book. This is a book. In this book, we have got 22 chapters written by 64 authors from 22 different countries, which confirm all those empirical statements that I have just shared with you. Culture and heritage have been important pull factors for so many years and centuries. And in the context of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Tourism Development, we have got those 17 SDGs, and when we talk about cultural tourism, it has the potential to accomplish some of the SDGs. We have 40% of tourist trips worldwide. They incorporate some form of culture. I have already mentioned about it, and even the report from the United Nations World Tourism Organization mentioned the same thing. And then an estimated 4 out of 10 tourists choose the destination based on cultural offering. This is coming from ICOMOS. And then what else? We can see that around 84% of members of the EU indicated that cultural tourism has a specific place in their marketing and promotional plan. And of course, because we are in India, let's talk a bit about India. India has got 40 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. I just hope that I'm not making a mistake here. This is coming from Pandey et al. And this gives an indication how rich is India in terms of cultural tourism. We have also some more findings when we talk about how to bring back cultural tourism into the game, bringing cultural tourism back in the game. So this is another book where we have got very interesting findings showing, giving some kind of, indications how we can bring back cultural tourism. And I think it's coming back. I have seen that it's coming back. And this book is very interesting because we have got case studies from 15 countries written by 70 authors again. Now, I will have to pass on to Mohanty. I think he's around, but because Mohanty, I am able to change the slide myself. So probably Mohanty can continue because he's the one who conducted the study.
Yes, I'm here. I am here. Yeah,
so I'm going to pass to you now. So you can start because you're the one who conducted the study.
Can you share the PPT, Dr. Vanessa?
No, I'm already sharing it. So can you see
but
that?
it's not coming in my screen. Okay, no problem. No, so I'm just I will start from the slide number introducing Odisha. Okay,
yes.
Fine. Thank you, Dr. Vanessa. Thank you. Introducing all kinds of cultural tourism in perspectives of architecture and iconic architecture and tourism. And let me introduce. My name is Dr. Patitapavan Mohanty. I am from Odisha, Bhubaneswar, and I am working as a assistant professor in Shiksha Anusandhan Institute. So, connecting Vanessa's discussion with architecture and, tourism or cultural tourism. So, our case study is in Odisha, the Golden Triangle of Odisha. As you know, that Golden Triangle is Cuttack, Bhubaneswar, Puri, and Konark. So, let me start this map of Odisha and introducing Odisha. There is a Sanskrit literature that is written as Varsanam Bharata Sreshta, Desanam Utkala Sreshta, Utkalasya Samadesya Nasti Mahitale Mahitale. It is Sanskrit, recitation said by Pani 2008, which is transcribed by the ancient poet Kapil Muni. is one of the ancient poet lives in India. It means that there is no such place like Utkal. Utkal is an ancient name of Odisha and exists in this universe or on this earth. And for this reason, Odisha is considered as the soul of incredible India. And if you go for the geographical location of this Odisha, as you know that Odisha is surrounded by the neighboring states like West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Chhattisgarh, from four corners, and it's the state which is a clear blend of religions, cultures, spiritualism, nature, art, which makes this state very inimitable. So Odisha actually, the introduction of Odisha actually bears a strong historical heritage, including several temples, monuments, which attracts tourists all from far across the globe. It is it is a land which is inculcated with art, craft, tribal culture, in picturesque beauties, and regional cuisines, very delicious regional cuisines that provides its enthralling experience to the tourists and the travelers. Furthermore, Odisha is a tourism delight for domestic and foreign travelers, as it is enriched with vivacious culture, heritage, and a wide ranging of topography. So this land, the land of Odisha, is a splendid natural resources as well as have cultural marvels, and it is always an exotic hub for the tourist. Though it is a state which is lagging behind all kinds of resources last couple of years or last 2 decades, but now this state is the able administration of our beloved CM Mr. Naveen Patnaik. This state is growing rapidly, and from the tourism front, it is gaining a lot of tourists far across the globe. So Odisha is a living symbolization and expression of Indian culture and heritage in its architectural essence. So this is the land which actually have the architectural magnetism, where ancient architectural beauties assembles with recent progress and growth. Odisha, with its nature's plenty of flora and fauna, represents the uniqueness created by the blend of.
Dr. Mohan,
Sorry, sir.
we can only see your head. Can you adjust the camera, please?
Just a minute, sir. Just a minute. Just hold on.
Yeah, that's better.
Some problems. Yeah, some problem in the network. So just let me fix it.
You're running out of time too, so please.
Yeah, I know that. So I think some problems in cameras. So can I go ahead without the cameras and all? Hello.
Yes, please continue. You have.
Yes.
Yes, please continue. There's 2 minutes left.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Better talk about the methodology, Mohanty. It's better to talk about the methodology.
Okay, fine. Then we'll our study of location is Golden Triangle of Odisha. As you know that it is Konark. It is one of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and Bhubaneswar, the city of temples, and Puri is famous for your Lord Jagannath temple. So I'll go directly to the methodology part, and this is a case study of kind of methodology, and we have a small case study, 3 months duration. The study instruments are both interviews and observation method, and we have interviewed 35 domestic and 15 international tourists, and it normally takes 3 weeks. And the place of observation is near about or in the vicinity of Golden Triangle, that is Bhubaneswar, Puri, and Konark. As you know that this Golden Triangle is famous for these all kinds of temple architecture and all. So the findings reveals that tourism and architecture work in a symbiotic manner, as said by the Dr. Vanesha. And iconic architecture has the potential to revive the tourism even in the post-pandemic context. If appropriately exploited, it not only adds value to the tourism, but also it gives some, it affords some prescribed by the UNTO and UNHO. So iconic architecture has various limiting factors when utilized as a tourism resources. Then the contribution of the study, there are 2 contributions of the studies, both in micro angle and macro angle. The study is the first to investigate the potential of iconic architecture in reviving the tourism state like Odisha following the pandemic, and the macro perspective is it makes a case on the potential of iconic architecture for pandemic tourism in India. then that's from my side, sir. Any questions you may ask, sir?
Thank you.
Dr. Mohanty.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Vanessa. We will now go on to the final presenter, Professor D.T. Vyas. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Galla. And it's the most difficult to be the last speaker. But I am so thankful to all of you for holding up the front, and also to the speakers before me who have been so engaging that, we were completely in the deliberations. If I may share my screen as I go ahead. So my topic is the feminist twist, subverting adventure in Indian children's literature. Before I begin, I would want to very quickly summarize what the kind of deliberations that were going on in past 2 days. So whether synchronously or asynchronously, we saw that last 2 days, the conversations were essentially real. And when I say real, I mean it in the context of real challenges. There was factual data, there was praxis-based empirical solutions that we all talked about. And in this context, I would want to open up an area which is related to the conference, and yet it slightly diverges from the discussion going on. In contrast to the real, I would want to offer the imagine. And why am I offering the imagined constructs of traveling women? Is because when we talk about representation as an area of study, representation study intermediates between foundationalist approach, which focuses on reality, which privileges reality, and it is the other extreme of this is superstructural approach, which privileges culture. So representation stands in between. It sort of mediates between both these approaches, and therefore it is very important to decode representation. In the words of Rajeshwari Sundararajan, a feminist scholar, she says that representation is a process by which the female subject is constructed in response to a variety of ideological imperatives. And her stance is supported by Jacqueline Rose, who calls representation as a domain with its own substantial political and political reality and effects. And therefore, it's very important to identify, I argue, that the trouble by the real women cannot lie outside the imagined constructs about traveling women through which the girls or women emerge as subjects. Before I go into the constructs, let me talk a little about the statistics. And when we look at the statistics, whether globally or in the context of India, since I'm going to talk about Indian context primarily, there is one thing which comes out in a big way, which is there has been a spurt in the number of women traveling, whether solo or in groups. Here is a national sample survey, NSSO, by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation study, which says that nearly 48% of trips taken in 2014 and 15 have been undertaken by women. Interestingly, the percentage was higher when it came to rural women in comparison to the urban ones. And the main purpose of these trips was health and leisure, and not shopping, as one would have likened women doing on their travel. If you look at also a study by OYO, this is 2019, it also talks about how Indian women are literally going places. It says that there was a 63% rise in the bookings done by women between the year 2018 and 2019. Also, with the post-COVID restrictions, there has been an increase in interest regarding solo traveling. So in the context of these surge of traveling women, this paper investigates how the representation of travel as reflected in the narrative of Indian adventure fiction takes a feminist turn. I would want to start by talking about why am I talking about children's literature particularly. And this is because children's literature, primarily being a body of writing which concerns itself with nurturing and grooming a child into independent, informed, literate individual. So as we are all deliberating about predicting and reshaping the contours of the future travel through these conferences, children's literature with its essential idealistic aspiration can be a site to derive inspiration from. Why then am I talking about adventure genre? Is because adventure is essentially characterized by home, away, home spatial pattern. There's a movement which is integral to the adventure genre where the protagonist is taken out of the home to unaccustomed safety, to the unusual sights, challenges, and experiences. Also, interestingly, I take this genre because it has been deemed as a boyhood genre, more than often associated with the beginning and extension of the British Empire building process. So one of the obvious outcomes that we see with a spurt in women traveling is also a lot of visibility of female characters undertaking adventures. Here is just a sample of books which have come out after 1990s, and each of these would have girls, women undertaking adventure. However, rather than going into just characterization as a means of identifying the feminist turn, I would today want to delve into the narrative structure. Feminist narratology is my tool that I'm going to use in order to delve into the narrative structure. And why do I do this is because the formalistic analytical tools and the terminological precision of narratology reveal very precisely the patriarchal or feminist intent interwoven in the novelistic narrative. I have Richard Branson up here, who in his discussion about what has feminism done to narratology, talks about various areas in which the intersection between feminism and narratology is visible, right from discussions about space, closure, character, narration, reader response, linearity, narrative sequence, and the entire phenomena of narrative itself. Well, I'll not be able to go into each of these, but I'm going to touch few of these aspects to demonstrate what has changed or how has the entire notion of travel changed in children's literature due to the entire feministic turn. So the very first thing that comes out when we talk about when we talk about adventure is its association with adrenal. It's essentially termed as an adrenal genre. It is characterized by page-turning pace. It has a linear temporal structure. It opens with a quest. It progresses through an array of frightening perils, and it ends with accomplishment of some important moral mission. And this entire formulaic structure of adventure has been critically viewed by the feminist narratologists. They say that this entire encompassment of moving forward by encompassment of more, striving to have to do more, to add more, is something which is extremely patriarchal in its orientation. And this is we have one more feminist narratologist on screen, Teresa de Lotus, who is talking about how in this entire act of moving forward and with the ambition of gaining, doing more, there is a whole terming of obstacles that come in this forward progression as female. So Teresa de Lotus says that this entire Oedipal desire to overcome obstacles is, is extremely patriarchal, whereas obstacles are viewed as female. And this is regardless of the gender of the text image. We are talking about a hero who is quote unquote male. The obstacle, whatever be its personification, is morphologically a female. So essentially, adventure rests on this notion of plot positions where there is a male, quote unquote, morphological male, trying to circumvent, to surmount obstacles which are essentially female in nature. Along with this, we also have discussion of how alongside obstacles, also goals are marked as female. So this is Susan Kunston, who is one of the pioneers of feminist narratology, who says that goals otherwise, unless otherwise marked, are defined as marginal, inhuman, devious, and monstrous. One of the ways in which the female is defined and socially produced is as an obstacle or as a goal. Quite literally, we see in some traditional, conventionally gendered adventure texts, they would typically end with I'm going a little forward to give an example from G.A. Henty's Winning the Spurs, which typically ends with a woman being offered as a reward to its hero. So going back to the idea that goals sometimes quite literally and always metaphorically in a patriarchally gendered adventure text would be a woman. In contrast to this, and this is a pattern that we see happening in various very, very well-known adventure stories, which I have on screen, and regardless of what is the internal theme, the broad overarching formula remains the same. However, the feminist turn does something to this entire formula. Number one, what it does is it re-Christians, regenders travel obstacles as a means of growth rather than obstacles. And here I would want to talk about a Gujarati text called Motnikin. In this text, in contrast to the patriarchal plot, the text revolves around the protagonist Raju and his quest for survival amidst life-threatening adversities that result from such an ambition to achieve more. So during his scout training, Raju misses an important lesson of caution and planning. He indulges in a false act of bravado where he is challenged by his friends to prove himself by walking on the edge of a cliff, and there he falls. So in the quest of his survival, Raju learns to occupy the female position. He learns to be more passive, to let go of his position of a male hero who is the active principle of culture, the establisher of distinctions, and the creator of differences in a traditional adventure text. And when he occupies this female position, there is a whole transformation of the equation of male hero plus female obstacle into something which is much more meaningful. So through his physical injury, and these are the obstacles: shortage of food, fear of wild animals, pangs of loneliness. These are all obstacles which are not coded as passive or female. In fact, they become enabling agents. It is through them that Raju learns how to survive. And when he comes back home, rather than basking in the glory of how he made his way through this desolate landscape, he realizes what we see on the screen, that if he would have followed the instructions of Yogesh sir and Sudhir sir, he would not have been in this mess. Similarly, in the Gujarati text, Haya, Venisha, and Kashvi, the obstacles are not allowed to emerge as hindrances. So it's very interesting as these three girls take their trip to a village called Vansalya, they encounter various situations that could potentially turn into a crisis situation. However, due to timely warnings and by sheer chance, these obstacles are averted. Through the strategy of averting obstacles, the narrative makes a feminist statement by setting up a pattern of what Susan Lancer calls anxiety and gradual relief, where worrisome predictions are made, but they're not fulfilled. And when these obstacles are averted, there's no need for overcoming them. So the plot function, which has been a male plot function, is completely eliminated. The plot is also replete with ungrammaticalities, where sometimes the obstacle is averted when one of the girls, Kashvi, ends up reciting a gibberish rhyme. So this also refutes the patriarchal norm of causal arrangement of events characterized by plausibility. Moving on to the next text, Aditi and her friends meet Grendel. This entire plot positioning of male quester and female object of quest is redefined, undone by introducing the idea of what is called collaborative quest. So Aditi and her friends undertake to cure Grendel's unique forgetfulness, unwillingly brought about by his mother. In the course of the quest, the questers realize that Grendel himself doesn't want to change, as he associates growing up with aches and pains and responsibilities. So rather than finding ways to ward off Grendel's forgetfulness, the questers realize that it's important to implant within Grendel the desire to grow. So they trick Grendel into realizing, and only when Grendel cooperates and collaborates, his memory turns quite excellent and the quest objective is achieved. I then move to another text called Rajula and the Web of Danger, where again there's a regendering of relationship between the quester and the quest which is seen. In first half of the novel, Rajula, who is a female quester, braves all the odds throughout her arduous journey in the quest of King Malushi, who she falls in love with. And in the later half, the king turns a quester to reach out to his beloved. So through their successful quest for each other, Rajula and Malushi show more than their mettle. They demonstrate that their love is unconquerable and they get each other as a reward. So this narrative changes the quester-quest relationship, as both the male and female protagonists take turns to be questers and objects of quest. The next one that I would want to point out is Sargamni Safar in Gujarati, which subverts the traditional notion of quest as conquest or enterprise by substituting it with the idea of fun. So Sargam the rabbit is fascinated by enjoyment that humans derive from sailing, but he's too scared to sail with humans. And his friend Kalu the dog helps him to overcome this obstacle through an ingenious creation of a makeshift boat made out of a tire tube. So the spirit of enjoyment between the friends is so evident in the way this entire narrative often breaks into songs. So there is a translation of the song that we see, and the the prose and poetry merge in each other as the narrative progresses. His immersive boat journey exemplifies the concept of what we were talking about yesterday, slow travel, that aims at exploring the destination thoroughly and deeply. Aditi and Her Friends in the Search of Shimik is another text which proposes the concept of adventure as a happy ending, whereby happiness is only restricted, not only restricted to questing protagonists. Not only the people who are traveling are happy, but also the ones around them are equally happy. And therefore, this text breaks the entire narrative into two parts, where in the first half of the narrative, there's a jubilation that happens. And in the second half, the questers realize that what they have, the punishment that they set out to meet was wrong. It was not right. They are filled with self-doubt, and they undertake a journey to undo the punishment that they have created. The text, by extension, encourages us to rethink and reimagine travel as a form of, as responsible travel, where the benefits are shared. Yes, Professor Galla. Where the benefits are shared by the residents, environment, and travelers. I would, for the paucity of time, ruthlessly try and close. But when I'm closing, I would want to talk a little about closure. Patriarchal closures of adventure stories as well as travels usually end with doing it for gram, right? For Instagram, or they end with some sort of public acclaim. However, rather than positing travel as a contest, there are texts in both English and Gujarati which end with reflection, rather than display of how great your travel was. Here's another text, Atisa, which ends with how the mother and son bond after the journey together, showing that travel could be a means for improving relationships. So when we come to today's world, where the whole idea of child as a resource, quite figuratively and literary, is riven with an unprecedented techno-scientific control and equally unprecedented ecological disaster. In a context like this, child is usually freighted with loads of expectations and anxiety about future. And if the literature for children, which is an integral part of our childhood, is imbued with these notions of travel, which are responsible travel, sensitive travel, empathic travel, we, through the literature for children, can create can bring to life the vision of travel that we are all attempting to imagine together. So I would end by talking about how children's literature could be used as an integral part of fostering responsible travel amongst children. Thank you so much, Professor Galla, for that extra 1 minute.
Thank you, Diti. Thank you, everyone. I think we just heard three excellent presentations. Now it's over to the people to ask questions. Thompson has already invited questions. Thompson, could you read them out, please, if anybody has posted?
There's no questions yet, so don't be shy. Feel free to type them in the chat or type your name in the chat.
Well, let me ask this question. I think that Diti, the statistics that you showed about single travelers among the states of India, apart from Punjab, all the others are from South India. Is there a contextual reason for this?
So, Professor Galla, the report mentions that down south, the perception of safety when women travel is comparatively higher. And also it did mention that because of a higher percentage of education, women were working more. So a lot of their travel was geared towards business trips, professional tours, and therefore, we see down south had highest number. Very interestingly, there were some places like, say, for example, Calcutta and Mumbai, which would see a spurt of travel during festival season. So that was also an interesting data point. Also, the travel of rural women is something which is very, very interesting, which interestingly surpassed the urban women traveling. So that is also an important data point. And when we talk about women traveling, we essentially think of a very modern, suave, educated woman, but we also should look at a rural woman traveling and also cater to her requirements and her safety.
Yeah, absolutely, Deeti. There are so many stereotypes about women, aren't there? I think we have to deal with those stereotypes. So, Subbalakshmi, a wonderful case study. Do you find any gender differences in the case study that you've taken up in Pune? Or can you do gender segmentation?
No, we actually have not taken the gender element into this, but I'm sure if we take into account the gender segmentation and look into the insights might be different, which we are probably planning in the next round.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that's great. And Vanessa, you used you intermix tourism, cultural tourism, heritage tourism. How do you differentiate between cultural tourism and heritage tourism?
Oh, you're muted.
Yes, no, it's okay. Yeah, I heard the question. I think you asked, how do I differentiate between cultural tourism and heritage tourism? Well, I feel based on whatever I have seen so far, how do we define culture first? Culture is a set of belief and practice, and heritage is something which is related to our past. I feel that there is lots of overlapping if we try to differentiate culture and heritage, because in heritage, you will have some element of culture, and in culture, you will have some element of heritage. So heritage, I think you're the expert in heritage. When I was mentioning during my presentation, especially, I like to talk about your webinars matters. I think this is something really very worthy, and it gives a deep insight of heritage, the intangible, tangible one. And I think this is how I would have replied to your question.
Thank you. Roma, you must have a question. Dr. Roma.
So, Professor, really interesting presentations and so different, each of them. For Dr. Vanessa, I was thinking, how do you, are there any global trends that local or global trends? Differences between global and local trends in tourism.
On cultural tourism or tourism?
Cultural tourism, yes.
Cultural tourism, yes, especially after the COVID-19, we see a tendency of people traveling mostly at our cultural sites. But then there's also something that we need to also understand, that people were so scared after the COVID-19 pandemic. So they were moving away from crowd. So which means that lots of people, especially in India, I'll take my own example. I will take myself as a case study. I have been traveling. Many times when I used to travel at the airport, there were almost no people. But these days, when you would travel, you will be surprised. If you have to travel, you have especially domestic flight, you have to have only 1 hour difference. You say that, for example, you have to travel at 5 o'clock. So you will reach the airport 1 hour before. But these days, if you do that, you might miss your flight. There are so many people traveling. So which means that the tendency of tourism, I won't say cultural tourism, I would say tourism in itself, it's growing. I don't feel that people say that after the COVID-19 pandemic, probably tourism will die, there will be no tourism. I see that it has become like, it's like a revolution. People are traveling out of revenge or frustration because there was a long lockdown, don't forget. And I don't know, some people suddenly, they realize that they have the affordability to travel. My opinion, in earlier times, my opinion was that people, to be able to travel, you need to have lots of money. But after coming to India, I realized that there is something called domestic tourism, which means that Indians travel a lot. I'm taking India as an example, as a case study. Indians travel a lot, absolutely, but not in Mauritius. In Mauritius, it's a small island. It's isolated. It's absolutely very far. If you want to travel, you need to have lots of money. You need to be very rich to travel. So Mauritian people, when they will travel, they will go to come to India or even to Europe, to America. It's a small island. It's lots of money. Whereas in India, I see that people are traveling a lot. So it's increasing massively. I can say that.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank
Yeah.
you. Back to Professor Subbalakshmi. I think I can't remember exact wording, but you gave the institutional versus there's a binary in terms of moderation, right? And but I couldn't help thinking, what about in between? Like a lot of these artisans have guilds. Guilds play an intermediary role between outside society and the insiders. So could you comment on that? You know about this more than most people.
I'm sure. I mean, many times they actually have this informal association more than the guilds. It's the informal associations that they build up, which does not permit them to actually. I mean, when I'm talking about the relational identity or the oppositional identity, I'm saying that, for example, let's talk about maybe block printing as contrast to the Pattachitra paintings. Now, in this case, many of these artisans have very strongly stated that we do not want to really go with the block printing, even though it reduces the effort. That the reason why we do not want to do it is because we want to stick to that authenticity. We want to say that even though it is taking almost 3 months in order to build up a single structure, single piece of the Pattachitra art, but still we want to do it on our own hand. We have certain basic diaries that has been passed on to us through our grandparents and so on, and we want to stick to that. So there have been some young, there have been a generation, the next generation, who has shifted to more or less to the block printing. Now, for them, sticking to the relational identity probably is a big question mark. They know that, okay, we want to do it within 2 days, the same, and you hardly can distinguish between the block prints and the hand painted ones. So even they have this notion of why we want to stick to it if we can do it within 2 days and earn almost the equivalent amount of money. So even though the informal associations are there, I think the young generations are someone who want to relate more to the oppositional identity, relational identity, and not go into the oppositional identity in order to counterfeit the growth challenges.
Thanks, Professor Subbalakshmi. Can I ask you another? I'm
Sure.
just waiting for questions. There are no questions in the chat box. So I'm just taking advantage of it. The case study that you picked, what was the impact of the pandemic and how did they survive and how were they repositioning themselves in the marketplace?
Actually, when we did the data collection, it was amidst the pandemic only. So, in fact, when my co-researcher who belonged to Pune, she used to visit those places, she would say that there are hardly any people who are actually buying from them. And so that was the reason she could actually get deeper insights with them, because they were anyways free and they thought that why not they get involved with her while she is buying bit small bits of stuff from them. And while the discussion, and this student happens to be a product design student, and so for that reason, she suggested that why not we go for multiple innovations instead of sticking to those general things that you are making. For example, the furniture or small pieces of handicrafts and other things that they are making, why not go for something which is more contemporary? For example, one of the products that she suggested is now with the idea innovation competition that won the second idea competition currently, where she thought that why not we make a headphone out of the bamboo craft instead of only developing those. So she has suggested multiple such products to those artisans, and they were quite open, maybe because of the pandemic where they are unable to do a lot of work. They were open for these innovations. So yes, they were hit a lot. And while we interviewed, they said that one of the factors due to which they could not do a lot of business during this is obviously the pandemic and cheaper alternatives which are available. For example, plastic, and the Chinese products which are there, which actually forms a lot of cheaper alternatives to the kind of handicrafts that they are making.
Thanks, Subbalakshmi. That's really, it's amazing work that you're doing. Now back to Professor Diti Vyas. This embeddedness of patriarchy, if you will. I mean, I think it's synonymous with, when I talk about decolonization, I also talk about how does one deal with patriarchy. Talking of tourism, like if you take the state of Andhra Pradesh, a lot of visitation, in the name of pilgrimage, is to the main male god temples. And yet, the 140,000 mother goddess temples. That is seen as something locally significant to the local communities, their sense of place and identity. Is this great thing of Brahmanical religions very patriarchal? Has it actually repositioned in a landscape where there's so many mother goddesses, but the male gods? Any reflections?
So thank you so much, Professor Galla, for that question. I mean, and you're so true when you said that the split between Akkam and Puram, the exterior and the interior, primarily happened during the colonial regime, because when we talk about colonization, we talk about home and the world, and the concentration or the confinement, if I may use that word, of women in home was essentially a very, very colonial induced phenomena. So earlier, when we talk about the pre-colonial women, we would see there are instances of female warriors. There are instances of Viranganas who would go and fight battles. They would be walking in the forest. But suddenly, in order to preserve the Indianness through the central figure of a woman, and posit this Indian woman as also a contrast to a Western woman who is not everything that the Indian woman is. So there was this essentialization that happened around the figure of Indian woman, which kind of denigrated a lot of these very, very integrally feminine arts, forms of worship, games for that matter, into the domain of home, the interior. So it's now, I think, with so much of debate, discussion, and awareness, and the whole process of decolonization that we are all now consciously going through, we are in the postmodern world. It's now time to revive that. It's a time to harness that internal, the feminine zone, and to bring out its energy.
How much do you think, this process is taking place in university campuses? Because I find a lot of curricular and pedagogy is still very patriarchal in universities in India.
I completely agree with you. And for the fear of sounding patriarchal and too ambitious, we need more. At least we need more of this, more discussion, more debates, more action, more collaborations. I think one of the challenges when we talk about fighting patriarchy is we fight patriarchy from our own silos. It's very important that we fight it together as a group, men, women, third gender, everybody included, whatever our position is, but at the same time respect the differences within our silos. So it has to
The
be.
reason I'm asking the question is that to me, tourism is one of the greatest patriarchal vehicles in contemporary world. It diminishes women. You know, if you look at advertisements, if you look at the promotions, it still diminishes the female and privileges the male image, the adventure image, the tough. Yeah.
So, and even when women are in vogue, Professor Galla, I was looking at that report by OYO, and which said that there has been a 63% increase. It sounded extremely patronizing and tokenistic to me. So we need to do a lot of.
I know we need to rethink a lot of things. Hopefully, there are 3 women presenting in this roundtable, and 3 different perspectives, and very important ones. Hopefully, there'll be changes through the next generation leadership of your generation. Is Dr. Mohanty online? I can't see him. From Odisha. Hello.
Not that I can see.
Vanessa? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Online? Is the colleague online?
Patita Paban, I can't see him. Let me see. I think he's disappeared. He has disappeared.
I wanted to ask about this, the iconic that he referred to as the triangle, golden triangle, very much is the center of intangible heritage in India. In fact, they recently had a very, very big national intangible heritage festival only last month. So I wanted to ask him the question about it, so the so-called iconic, which is very much, sort of the stereotype, and how does one moderate it? How does one actually deal with the tangible and intangible? But that's all right. I mean, I can't see him online. I wanted to ask him that particular question. But my answer to the last question that I asked you, Vanessa, is Professor Michael Hall, who is an authority on tourism.
Yeah,
he and I, when we used to teach together, we always took the line, all tourism is cultural. All tourism is a choice. All tourism is cultural. And as the Aboriginal people have advocated very strongly in Australia, how cultural tourism, heritage tourism, and those of us into conservation, we argue that heritage tourism is one where you use non-renewable resources, whether it's heritage, however you define it, natural, cultural, environmental. When you use those resources that are non-renewable, then we use the expression heritage tourism. It's standard in all the charters, ECOMOS charter, ICOM charter, UNESCO charters, UNWTO, all the charters, it's standard. That's why I was asking that question, because I wanted the people listening. So the thing is, it's not only synchronous speakers and audience, but asynchronous. This is being recorded by Dr. Tamsin Gilbert, and she'll be sharing it, and there'll be many more people. Hundreds of people will be listening in the next 1 year to the conversation that's taking place. And now, tell me, Professor Subbulakshmi, you gave one case study. Are there any others you're looking at? Just briefly.
In fact, we have some of our fellows here who have worked on multiple case studies. We have Ayushi and Niyati, who had worked on the Motikam works of Gujarat. We have Shabir, I think they worked on the pottery of Kerala. Then we had one on the funeral coffins of Khana. So there were multiple case studies that were taken into account, but for the time being, I have only analyzed one part of it. Maybe I need a little bit more time in order to analyze the others. I'm sure when we are talking about the Motikam artisans of Gujarat, I'm sure there will be some orientation that we can find in terms of gender. Because most of the artisans are women artisans. And therefore, I'm sure we can have some insights in terms of gender when we are talking about the Motikam artisans.
Thank you, Professor Subbulakshmi. Are there any questions, comments? I mean, fellows, are you just listening? And I also see the name Pamela Perez. You've been very attentive in all the presentations, Pamela. Do you have any questions? No, she's muted, so.
No, hi, here I am. No, I found the presentations fascinating. I love especially that it's so global. The people are, presenting from all over the world. I hail from Southern California. Had to get up a little early, to make my presence. And I especially love the presence of India. Oh my gosh, I didn't know, it was so active and so many things were going on. And I just want to put this out there. My presentation was on vaccination tourism, and, which is kind of the larger umbrella of medical tourism. And, I'm kind of disappointed not to have been able to make my presentation because I thought I'd be able to do it. But I want to bring up something. Now, why is it that people don't talk about dialectical materialism anymore as a form of philosophical analysis? Now, I know that a lot of you are perhaps too young, to have been exposed to this form of philosophical analysis. But, when I was growing up, I went to the University of Madrid, the Complutense, and, I got the most stellar education for free. I always hail to the European form of education because it is the public schools that are the stellar schools, and they're not interested in daddy's wallet. They're interested in, the gray matter in people's heads, So I had the most stellar education, and I got 2 PhDs, one in political science and one in sociology, as well as all my undergrad and grad work there. And I'll do a little plug in my book right there, right? This was my dissertation. And anyway, so what happened, and I see Professor, and this is the first time I've ever had the pleasure of encountering you, sir. And I have my glasses on. I'm trying to get away from the habit of wearing glasses. Not good news for ophthalmologists. But I think your eyes are better if you don't wear glasses. So your name is Sir but I hear people calling you Amar, like the architect.
Oh, right. Amareshwar Gala. Yeah. Just call me Amar.
Yeah, I heard that gentleman, the architect, yesterday calling you just Amar. So there's my cell phone. I'll be familiar in calling you just Amar, if I may. So, sir, you're nodding at your head. What happened to dialectical materialism? I mean,
You tell us, Pamela, what happened to her, because
I don't know.
I belong to the 70s and neo-Marxist schools
Me
of
too.
thought.
Me too, yeah. And that was it. I mean, at the Complutense, everything was dialectical, and it is the most succinct and the clearest and the most transparent form of understanding reality. What happened to it? And now they talk about dichotomies, and that's my cell phone going. I don't know where it is. And I had a friend of mine said, no, the panel that doesn't even exist anymore. And now it's postmodernism. And what is all this garbage? I'm sorry to call, but I mean, what happened? I'm sorry to call it that, but what happened to dialectical materialism? It is the most amazing form of thought of understanding reality. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do a presentation on the Ciencias Disciplinarias in Greece, Arnapago. But anyway, I've got my presentation, and it's about Hegel, and Hegel was the, what do you say? In Spanish, you say precursor, predecessor of Marx's dialectical materialism. And what happened to it?
I
Mr.
know.
Anwar, what
I think,
happened?
Pamela, you raised a very important point.
Let's
I
get
think
back
that
to it. Let's get back to it.
one of the challenges with contemporary scholarship is that we suffer from cultural amnesia. The things that we discussed, we analyzed, we don't go back to them. And I think this is the point that Professor Diti Vyas is asking us is to rethink, where Professor Subbulakshmi is taking her students and fellows back to basics, basically. And I think we need to get back to that. But we're out of time, so I would say that that's a good, Pamela. Thank you so much. That's a good question on which to
let's get back to it.
everybody to reflect.
I'm just going to be very
What
brief.
happened to dialectical materialism?
Oh, please, let's get back. I am retired now, so I don't have the opportunity to bring that into the classroom anymore. But let's, those of you who are still teaching, look it up, Google it and and bring it into the classroom and teach the students to think along the lines of John. And let's just be very brief about it. It is, sir, do you want to remember? Do you remember what the 3 steps are? It's so succinct. Do you remember, Mr. Anwar? Do you remember? Do you remember? I'll just say,
absolutely. Thank you, Pamela. Really appreciate it.
Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. That's it. Come on, it's wonderful. I think there's almost a conspiracy. The Sorbonne, they don't teach it anymore. What's going on? I think there's a conspiracy. People don't want us to understand what's really going on in dichotomy and all this stuff. Anyway, pleasure to see you. Is this the end of the conference?
I'm with you, Pamela. I'm with you about what you said. And I think you're leaving all of us to something to think about.
Yes, that was
now I'm going to hand over to, because we're out of time.
Yeah,
I'm going to hand over to Dr. Tamsin Gilbert. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for attending the session today. We have recorded the session, so it'll be uploaded to the event schedule later on. You can join us and comment in the discussion board. If you leave the session today and you realize you've forgotten to ask a question, you can go ahead and write there in the discussion board, and everyone will be able to access that and see that today. Thank you for joining us. And I think that's all from me. Amar, did you have any final words?
No, I think that's it.
Thank you all. Have a nice...
Next year the conference is in
Granada.
Is it the University of Granada?
It's the University of Granada in Granada, Spain. We're actually just working on the website now, but it looks like it's going to be the 14th to the 16th of June.
And it definitely is going to be blended, which means we will be there face to face.
Yeah. We need to. Yeah, we will definitely. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you all and continuing the discussion there, if not beforehand.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you, Subbulakshmi. Thank you, Diti. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Dr. Monty. And thank you, Pamela, for that last stirring, passionate intervention. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Good night. Good night, all the attendees. Good night.